Welcome to the Unfolding Thought Podcast. My name is Eric Pratum. Today, I'm speaking with Ryan Scott, head of product at DNA Behavior, a company that is deeply immersed in behavioral data analytics. Ryan and I talk about his path from interning at DNA Behavior while studying finance to eventually spearheading product development and pioneering AI innovations to help his clients get better insight into their own and their clients' behavior and thought patterns. Ryan discusses how AI is reshaping his work, from automating complex behavioral analysis to leveraging machine learning for scalability. If you listen to this podcast regularly, you might recognize Ryan's company because I spoke to his CEO in episode 31, which I will link to in the show notes. And now I bring you Ryan Scott. Ryan, thank you for joining me. Would you mind telling me about yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric. Yeah, so I'm Atlanta born and raised, so Atlanta native. I actually have worked for the same company at DNA Behavior for 14 years now. So I actually met DNA Behavior and Hugh Massey, the CEO, who you've also had on your show before. I met him whenever I was an intern in college. And I was really fascinated because DNA Behavior was doing some really early machine learning work at Georgia Tech. Early meaning 2010. So that was like before I had even heard of it. And I was just really fascinated with the type of scalable number crunching that they were doing. And I had a finance background, so I was just really fascinated in the way that they could understand people in a very minute way, but using math. And I always loved math and loved learning about people. So it kind of drew me to the company. And I started a product management path with DNA. So Hugh very quickly realized that I had a knack for product management, product design. And I grew from being a product management intern all the way to now I'm the head of product. So over those 14 years, you could probably imagine that the company has changed quite a bit. One of my first jobs was to process behavioral profiles. So think of it as kind of like personality testing, but for enterprises. And I was processing behavioral profiles, but they were faxed to us. We would print them out. I would have to manually key them into basically a spreadsheet, glorified spreadsheet, come up with the scores, and then PDF it and then email it back to them if they even use email. If not, we would fax it back to them. So I started all the way from that very rudimentary task to now we're doing a lot of stuff with AI and machine learning on a very, very big scale, and helping a lot of larger enterprises with the work that we do. So we focus primarily on enterprise behavioral data analytics. So it's finding very, very minute behaviors and behavioral patterns. I think of it like personality insights on a person, but we can do very minute, detailed insights across a whole company, across a whole country even. And we can do anything from, tens of thousands of records at once to our most recent one was 97 million records. So very, very large data and a lot of insights. So it's just really fascinates me with the product. And lately I've really been focusing more on AI. So I have an AI certification with Microsoft. So I'd love to talk to you more about AI and my thoughts around that. And just my overall passion for R&D and innovation is just something that drives me on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. You said you were studying finance. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. So I have a business degree with finance. And I always thought that I would be, working in Wall Street or something similar to that, even if it was in Atlanta. And I had never even heard of behavioral finance back then. So finding Hugh and behavioral finance is something that just the universe just wanted me to meet him at that time. And I think that's kind of one of the interesting moments of my life.
Yeah, given Hugh's background and what has, I believe, for some time been the bulk of your clientele, though, as I understand it, that's not your only customer base anymore because of the different products and services and all that. But given, his background, I can imagine, how coming from your studies, you would get connected as an intern. But given what you do now, was there a specific description of the role of your intern role that, was specific to finance, or was it just that the business, the work related to finance and that was the connection?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the company has really had four dramatic shifts. So we used to very much be aligned with personal finance. So it was all about wealth management, wealth building, coming up with very fine-tuned financial data about a particular person. So an example of that would be their risk score or which portfolio that they would be suited towards. So you can figure that out with psychometrics and behavioral patterns. So probably the job description at that time, it was for a different company name actually, because we shifted company names. It was for financial DNA is what we used to call ourselves. And it was probably much more suited to that financial lens. So, helping people, matching individuals to the right wealth management portfolio, coming up with financial advisor insights so that they can match couples up with the right portfolio or understand risk patterns. But now, because we have such a vast array of insights, we can't just describe it in such a fine-tuned, financial lens. So yeah, I think you're onto something, that it probably was more connected to what I ultimately saw myself doing. And now I'm really not focusing on finance at all. I've really, dabbled in and drilled into AI and machine learning, and do most of my work looking at Microsoft Azure screens and not, things that are specific numbers to wealth management.
When you mentioned keying in data from things that you would get faxed and all of that. So around about the time that it sounds like you were an intern and then potentially graduating, I lived in Atlanta and was running a digital team for an agency. We did a lot of, for a marketing agency, we did a lot of analytics work. And I can remember building some pretty in-depth Excel files, and then eventually, I forget what is the Microsoft product that is it Access? Microsoft Access.
Yeah, it's like a big Excel sheet kind of thing.
I can remember going through a lot of probably similar experiences, and then you kind of learn as you go where you can automate things, or even if there's not an automation, well, I can set up a API call or a pull from one file to another file or from one server down into spreadsheet. And then I'm guessing that just kind of iterating on that is what likely led you to, from whatever technical skills or data skills you had with your finance studies, to now it sounds like you are more deeply technical, if I can put it in that way.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's been an interesting shift in my career because, if you just call it 15 years since I graduated college, I started out with the typical, business tools. I was using Excel, basic Excel formulas, then learning how to do Excel on a pretty advanced level. Then as our company was growing and we were dealing with bigger data sets, then, it got to the point where we're dealing with data so big it won't even run in Excel. So then we're dealing with all kinds of throughput issues, or using queries in Power BI. There's like another coding language called DAX that you can use in order to manipulate data on a big scale, Power queries. And then now we're dealing with such big files that we can't even use those tools. It's like too big to even run on a computer. So then we're running it inside of the Azure cloud. But all of this is happening while we have all these amazing tools at our disposal with AI that it can actually write the code for you. So it's kind of an interesting shift that's happened is as I become more technical, I'm not having to hand off so many projects to developers because there's so many AI tools that can write the code for you with just natural language. So that's kind of what I'm dealing with in the last 2 years is there used to be things that I would have to document, delegate off, and just review whenever it came back to me from a highly skilled developer. But now there's so many tools available through Azure and with AI that some of the code just writes itself. And then you can get a pretty quick result or at least see if it works or doesn't work within a few minutes. So that's a really interesting thing that's happened pretty much in the last 12 months and really excited thing that's going on. The AI thing it just blows my mind every time that I use a tool or see something that new that it can do. It's really changing the way that we all work.
What are some of the products or services that you work on, or as a bit of a refresher, hopefully people have listened to Hugh's episode, so you might restate a little bit and some people will not have listened to it. But what are some of the products or services that your company offers and you've worked on? And then hopefully that will bridge us a little bit into talking about some of the AI or the machine learning that you've done.
So our insights are about individuals. So the way that they work, live, interact, make decisions, invest even. So we have 4,000 different insights. We can pretty much describe every single aspect of a person's life. That would just show up in our system on a series of charts and insights that are typically a number-based insight where we would measure an individual's behavior against the population of everybody that's been evaluated before them. So if a person's a 50%, that means that they're going to be a middle of the road individual, so really not strong behaviors. But if they're on the lower end or the higher end, they're going to have pretty high or strong behavior. So that would be things that you would really start to notice in the wild. So like if you're in the grocery store and you see someone that's being really loud or really excited, or if you see somebody that's doing some sort of mural painting and it's extremely loud and creative as far as the colors they chose, are probably a very creative person. And then that creative person, the way that they would approach different tasks or investments or work with others, that would shine through in their day-to-day life. So we're pretty much predicting the way that people would act whenever you meet them in person. So we sell this on a B2B basis. So it's a subscription-based service that companies license. And they typically want their relationship managers or sales managers or financial advisors even to get these insights because they can see how to mimic the types of communications that these people are wanting so that they can make the relationship easier for the customer. That would be the typical use case. So there's a few different ways that we can collect the information, and this is kind of how AI and some of the bigger learning models come into play, is that the traditional way that people used to complete the profile is by answering specific questions about themselves on a computer screen. And that results would come back to DNA, we would score them, and then we would show those results back to them in some way, whether it be a dashboard or a report. Now, we have gone through a massive exercise of mapping out all of the outcomes of the exercise. So if someone's commanding or creative, are they an introvert or an extrovert? We've taken all those insights and we've mapped those to demographic data points that describe somebody. So is somebody in the Southeast? Are they male or female? What type of job do they have? What's their zip code? What type of school did they go to and why did they choose that school? Those are all types of demographic points that we could pull off of. There's a number of other ones. And then in addition to that, we can also look at the way that people write about themselves. If we can find some insights about them online, that they've written about themselves or profile information that they've made and shared on a social media platform. We can often extract that. And then we have a whole algorithm that can score it, so that if we just know the demographic data points, we then can give you the same predicted result as if they were completing the questionnaire. So that's kind of the new age way that we're able to do this without the end user even participating actively in the process.
So I'm connecting some dots now with what Hugh said when I talked to him, but it seems clearer to me where automation would come in now, because I'm a financial advisor or whatever it is that I do. But let's say I'm a financial advisor. I've just brought on a new client and I want to know how to best communicate with them, the communication styles or language or who knows what that will ensure that I best service them, perhaps. And so if I'm subscribing to your service, then maybe I'm able to have my client take an assessment of some sort. But perhaps even if I don't do that, I'm able to go find their LinkedIn profile, maybe, or some articles written about them, whatever it is. And whether I provide that to you or I just give you a name or something, there's some amount of information that I give you. And with your AI or with your tool generally, then you're able to provide me with something that says basically, Eric, this client might be this kind of person and might respond to this type of communication. Is that correct?
Yep, that's spot on. On a communication basis, if a marketer just wants to know that, we can just give them one of 4 persona quadrants. So it'd be this person's take charge, which that's someone that is very fast paced. A marketer would send them copy that had bullet points versus maybe a long video that was warm and friendly. And that would be more suited to someone that's opposite to them. So that's kind of how that would play, and give a specific example.
And so you have a big database. Your business has been doing assessments, making recommendations about behavior. I forget some of the terminology, but I recall Hugh talking about sort of what is the instinctive or baseline behavior that people are going to have around money or in difficult situations. So you have all of this data, and I believe you've been able to look at your data, over time, and then you've been able to correlate some of the data points or the answers that you have gotten from people taking these assessments or the surveys with the outcomes that you see. So then you're able to not have someone have to take a survey or an assessment. And with some level of accuracy, you can sort of predict that person's natural financial behavior or stress behavior or whatever it is.
Yep. Yeah, that's spot on. And that's part of my focus area at DNA, is figuring out how we solve all these problems with data, and or features in our app. So at the end of the day, we have an app that our subscribers are looking at whenever they're reviewing the data, and they know the people in real life that they're using our products on. So if they use the digital scan tool to predict what their style is or their behavior is using AI, eventually they will talk to that person. They'll have a Zoom call, or a phone call, or meet them in person. They can rate whether positive or negative on how well we did, predicting that style. So that's one of the feedback loops that we have. The other is that if they want to get a step higher degree of accuracy, they can always dispatch a questionnaire and get that full scan, as we call it. And then our system will automatically review how well we predicted that person's style. and then the AI will learn from that. So that goes into a little bit of my specific specialty at DNA, where there's a lot of these problems that we have with doing such an innovative approach, and we've had to solve these using a mixture of high tech tools, but then also just user experience features inside the tool.
Tell me then about where you are using pre-existing AI tools versus where you feel like you're creating something from scratch.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different categories of AI that exist out there. The most common one that I think that people have the most exposure to would be something like ChatGPT. So that's a large language model, and it's very good at understanding natural language that people can input and perform different tasks, with that information. It's extremely good at that. But the screen that people are seeing when they're just at chatgpt.com is slightly different than what you would use if you were a developer or a business architect, using those same tools. So you can subscribe to a different version of ChatGPT, and you can have, rather than the output being on a screen that you could read, you could have the output sent to a database, and then that could start triggering events. So we use that particular function quite a bit in our work. It's using, the OpenAI, who's the builder of ChatGPT. It's using their API platform in order to perform specific tasks. To give you an example of probably the most widely one that we use, multiple times a minute, every single day, we use a specific AI that we built that converts and standardizes individuals' job titles to what their standardized job code is. So if you think about on someone's LinkedIn, you may look at your full list of everybody that you're connected to, and you might not see the same job title twice. Everybody likes to get creative with their job title. They want themselves to sound different and sound unique, especially if they're small business owners. And that's really, really hard whenever we're managing data to figure out, okay, this person says that they are, even a head of product. That's my title. What does that mean? Do they work for a software company, or are they, a head of a food scientist product person? We have to use AI to figure that out. So we have built one that's proprietary to DNA that it just solves that problem day in and day out. And it predicts what someone's SOC code is, which is the Department of Labor code. And then that gets spit into our database. And then we know, okay, they're one of these 1,200 different codes that have already been set up and standardized in our platform. And then from that, we can kind of figure out, okay, they're in this type of group of people versus that. That's kind of the starting point for that digital scan tool. So that's one of the tools, but we have a bunch of other ones that will interpret reports for people. We're working on some really cool stuff with R&D, where we have coaches and consultants that are more experienced than the other behavioral tools that are out there. There's about 2,000 that are in the market. But a lot of coaches and consultants move to DNA behavior because they like how tech focused we are, and our app is really cool and it's fast and it's very customizable. So coaches can kind of make it look like their own branding. So they like that, but they're just not used to seeing insights in the same language that we show them. So we have specific AI models that will facilitate a report for somebody, but in the terms that they're more familiar with. If they're used to seeing things in Enneagram terms or DISC terms or Myers-Briggs terms, that our whole AI model can kind of expedite that work for them. So that's just another example of kind of how we're using it.
With automation, it's I've experienced that it's easy for things to go wrong at scale. And so I'm wondering how, either over time or today, and actually both, I'm wondering how you validate when you're standardizing job titles, for example, how do you validate that you're accurate at a high level, whatever percentage you need to have? And then how do you monitor ongoing that tool and then your process generally continues to be as accurate as you need it to be within some, tolerance level?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, the point about accuracy and just reliability is key to any of this. Um, if anybody's listening and they're kind of interested in exploring this realm of, architecting different solutions with AI, I strongly recommend that you go through a course that Microsoft has. It's called AI 900, and it has this whole end-to-end process on um, like a code of ethics and the transparency and reliability that you need to build into all these different tools and kind of industry best practices of how to do it. We we have almost all of our product team have gone through this particular training, and we've learned some really interesting learning lessons that Microsoft is just sharing with the public. So, and this is one of them. So, at any point in our process, we always print out any decision that an AI makes to a log file. So we always know the input and the output of a specific action. So I could look at a log file in our system and then I could see, okay, this person called themselves a behavioral superpower coach, which is a real person that we're partnered with. That's what her job title is. And our AI predicted that she was a business coach, which is correct. But that would be printed in our log file. If it said that she was a sports coach, that would be incorrect. So that later down the road, if her record got a thumbs up or thumbs down, we'd be able to go in back and check to see, okay, where did this go wrong? The other thing that we do, and this is a pretty common thing, it's a cost cutting thing, is that once you've ran a particular process through an AI model, you use that same log file that's been verified as a lookup so that you don't have to pay for every single transaction. So every single time you hit that OpenAI API, it costs a few cents. So you can imagine if you're doing that a million times a day, it gets quite expensive. So you only want to use that for problems that you haven't solved yet or things you don't know the answers for. So if you have these log files that are vetted and well produced, you have something that's pretty good, and like that can be your standard. And then you just need to make sure that if you are running the same thing through your system 2 times in a row, or maybe even spaced out between a week or a month, that they're giving you the same reliable answer. So we've had to develop a lot of case studies that our QA team will pump through our system and make sure that it's reliably answering the same problem in the same way. But that's just, I think that's one of the really key things that a lot of firms are missing right now. And Microsoft is really, really harping that if you're using our technology, you need to do it this way. And they'll even boot you out of the Azure platform if you're not adhering to their standards.
With the shift that it sounds like has occurred for you in recent years, either beginning to use or going heavier into the utilization of AI, what are some of the surprising things that you found about AI? I think you said something to the effect of, you're still surprised at what these things can do. So what is it that has surprised you, and what is it that continues to?
Yeah, I think my first aha moment was its ability to adapt written copy, but in the terms for a specific audience. So an example of that would be, let's say that we have a report, an Excel report, and I haven't even really looked at the data. I could upload it into ChatGPT, have it give me some finding about if sales are up or sales are down, or it could even figure out maybe if there's a trend in the data and maybe there's a cyclical element to the business, and it could just spit that out in plain language. If it's just an individual user using that, that's already helpful. But tools, and particularly Copilot is really honing in on this, that you can easily just click a button and be like, no, I want this to be written in the lens for a C-suite. And it knows that C-suite is going to need something that is super, super concise. It's almost awkward for a normal person to write that. That's a plebe. It's not the way that we normally write. But it's very, very good at writing things in bullet points and condensing it down. So it's just the absolute facts. And it did that from a raw Excel spreadsheet. I think that that's really fascinating how some of these engineers have really connected these different writing styles that people have and the expectations. And I think that really helps us all work better together. It just expedites everything. I just recently saw in a webinar that Microsoft, in one of their business intelligence dashboard tools, is called Power BI. They had this new prompting widget that you can just add to a dashboard, and it will describe everything that's going on the screen, all the different trends, all the insights, and then there's these distinct buttons, and based on how you want to see the information described to you, it just immediately adapts it, and it's using the OpenAI and Copilot to do it. I think that's really cool. And I really do think that that's the future in all this. Microsoft has developed a org chart white paper. It just released a few weeks ago, and they're pushing every single executive to start to think about what will that modern futuristic org chart look like. And they're predicting it's going to be a combination of humans working right next to, in the org chart at least, the AIs that they manage. And that we need to start mapping out how all this is going to look and work, and how machines can talk better with humans and how humans can talk better with machines. Maybe DNA Insights can be helpful in that, hopefully, at least.
You mentioned Copilot. I think you're talking about Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, Office within Teams and all of that. Are you also using things like GitHub Copilot, or are you using any AI IDEs, or what sort of tools, I guess, do you all use?
Yeah, I love this question because I've automated, as you would imagine, I've automated most of the things on my computer. So I guess I'll start with my inbox. I've recently started to use a tool called SaneBox. I don't know have you heard of this tool before?
I have not, no.
It's really amazing. We're not affiliated with them at all. I actually just found it it was on a YouTube. And it was just talking about different AI personal assistants that we can use just to kind of make our workday less frustrating. SaneBox, it uses AI to predict what is in the message and who is sending it and what the content is. And it creates these smart filters or smart folders inside of your inbox, so that things that you need to look at right away, that's in your inbox, that stays in the inbox. Things that you just need to look at periodically, that would go in a subfolder. Things that are just news related to, there's a lot of alert emails that we get, like you have a new transaction or you have a shift in a calendar or something like that may not be very timely, that could go in there. And then they have this other thing called, it's a smart inbox called Black Hole. And it's kind of this new way of unsubscribing to people. So you can just pump it into Black Hole, then you don't get any alerts for that particular person. And eventually they'll just try and unsubscribe you without you having to go through all the steps of clicking unsubscribe and going through all those windows and whatnot. So I use SaneBox. I have upgraded my Teams instance, and everybody in DNA Behavior, our Teams instance, so it's the pro version. We use Copilot, the meeting assistant, to record, transcribe, and condense all of our meeting notes. If somebody is out of the office or on vacation, it will still take notes for them, and it'll even give you a printout of every single time your name was listed, so that you're just seeing that specific point in time. You don't have to listen to the whole call. I think that's a really, really big time saver. I use the pro version of ChatGPT for writing copy um, maybe taking some bullet points and putting it into an email we need to send to our client, or condensing down something that could be really, really technical. Or if we need it written in a technical language, but I don't want to spend the time to do it, ChatGPT's great at that. For any research projects, I use a tool called Perplexity, and I have the pro version of that. And that is a really, really good deep research tool. I see you nodding your head. Do you use some of these as well?
Oh yeah, I use AI, the common tools, quite a bit.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, in your experience, Perplexity versus ChatGPT, do you use one for the other, or for specific tasks?
Well, so I'll preface my answer with saying that by my nature, I really limit what I focus on. And so I am a very curious person. I read a ton of books and all that. But the thing is that while I read a ton of books, I don't also follow a bunch of people on social media or watch a bunch of TV shows or whatever. I still watch video, whether it's YouTube or movies or whatever. That's not to say that I don't do these things, but I'm just really limited in where I spend my time, for example. And so I use ChatGPT for things like this almost exclusively, not because it's the best necessarily, but because for the sort of mental burden that I have myself, because of just who I am, of switching from one tool to the next, I get the net best benefit from ChatGPT. Now, that said, I do, in my limited experience with Perplexity, or even just comparing day to day ChatGPT versus Claude, for example, I do definitely see that Perplexity is better when you are integrating search into it. And even potentially you could talk about Notebook LM. I really like Notebook LM for certain things, but I just find that I don't use it unless I feel like it's worth going through the the switching that I would need to, because everything is in ChatGPT. It sounds like for you, whether it's your personality or your needs, that you have found kind of your specific use cases where this tool or that tool does the best job, and you're able then to go there for those things.
Yeah, that's right. And I use Perplexity for very, very minute things. So we use a tool called Azure Data Factory, which isn't very common. It is very error prone because it's doing, I mean, we use that tool to process the 97 million names. So you can imagine it's processing that many names over a span period of maybe 8 hours. And it could run into a number of issues, whether it's, that it's expecting one data type and it's getting another, or it could just time out. Any number of issues. Perplexity is really good at understanding because it uses the search, uses Reddit, it uses a lot of user communities to figure out what is actually going on. Perplexity is good at solving very, very specific errors or debug, or giving you tips on maybe where you should look for it in order to solve the problem. So I use it for that, but I don't like it for writing, which is why I use the ChatGPT version. So you and I probably have very different workflows as well. So it probably works with that too. Have you used a tool called N8N before?
I know of it, but no, that was another thing, like people mentioning it, and I'm like, I'll go and look when I recognize that my existing tool set is not working properly. But I think is do people use it in part when they're piping data from one system to another, or for integration of different tools?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like a workflow automation tool. You can add an AI bot as one of the steps, but a lot of small business owners sole proprietors, or people that are just kind of building proof of concepts and prototypes. They use it because it's a very visual way of seeing how different things are connected. And it's a no code solution. So you don't really need any kind of coding language to build an end to end software program. Really, it's pretty cool. We use it for prototyping. Um, if we need to just see if something generally works, if there's a new AI model that we're working on and we just need to see, okay, does this have legs? Is this even worth us investing the time and energy to build it for our customers? We could build a proof of concept in N8N, show it to our customers as far as this was what this could look like if it was inside of our tech system. Is this work? Is this, how would you value this? And then we could just figure out, is this going to pay off from an ROI perspective before we build it? So I really like that. And if anybody's listening to this show and they're interested, or if you're a student and you're very passionate or interested in AI, N8N is a really, really good tool to look at. They're very, very friendly as far as the price is concerned. There's a lot of ways that you can start for free, whether it's just doing it on your local computer or doing it in a starter plan. So I would urge you to kind of start there. That's a really good point.
For the work that you do, have you had to do any either fine tuning of existing large language models and or use retrieval augmented generation or things like this, as opposed to just having, just pulling on existing models?
Yeah. So almost every single one of our tools has a RAG, especially if it's a production one that customers are seeing. It would have a RAG that it's just a extra layer of security to make sure that nothing is getting in there, getting mixed up with, customer insights. We have to be careful on, what information do we share into these models, because a lot of our clients are cognizant with that, or we have different contracts in place that would prevent us from, using it for everything. As far as fine tuning, yeah, we do a lot of fine tuning. We have had to build a lot of processes to fine tune all of our models on a regular basis. So we have every Thursday, we have an operations call where we review every single exception with one of our AI bots. So it's a customer-based chat bot that answers their questions on how to use a tool, or what does this insight mean, or points them to the right direction of creating support tickets, all kinds of things. It can answer a ton of different questions. There's about 10,000 pages of text that we use to train it. So the context of the type of question and the type of answer, it's very sporadic. So we have to review that one every week just to see, okay, is there a new question that we've gotten that we've never received before? How did we answer that? And a lot of those, it's very, very good. So we're not having to do very many rewrites. But there's a lot of tools where you can just manage the answers in these AI bots, and you can just click on it, and then you can just train the AI bot by just almost kind of writing over the way that it did respond. And then it relearns with what is the right answer in that particular context. So with that particular tool, we have to use a special management portal in order to do that type of retrain. It's not just with OpenAI's website. But yeah, that's a big component of this, and that's always one of my big warnings with companies when they want to add a chat bot to their website, is you need to make sure that there's some sort of management process in place, and not just let the thing run wild, because it does come up with some crazy answers sometimes if you haven't put the right controls into place.
It sounds to me like for doing your fine tuning, you are using a tool that would sit in the middle between, if I go to platform.openai.com at the moment and I do some fine tuning, if I'm just working right within their interface, or if I'm making a call from the command line to their API, they ask that I set everything up, or they require that everything is set up within a JSON-L file. And it sounds to me like you are using something that would sit between that so that you're not having to once a week manually recreate a JSON-L file to do your training. Is that right?
Yeah. There's a piece of middleware that we license that allows us to do it. The tool I'm happy to share. We don't have any affiliation with this company, at DNA Behavior, but it's called WonderChat, and we've had good experience with using this particular tool. Behind the scenes, we are using open AI models to produce the AI responses. So that's the large language model behind the scenes. But as far as managing the customer interactions, organizing that, seeing exception reporting, making it very easy to retrain the model without having to deal with JSON code and all of that. WonderChat is a pretty good tool for getting started.
So, a lot has changed the way that or in the way that you do your work, it sounds to me. And a lot is changing right now. So, do you foresee that in 3 months or 6 months or 2 years, you will have certain types of solutions, or that you will have solutions for things that right now maybe have to be handled manually? Like maybe you don't have to have that Thursday meeting in 9 months because this one technology or another gets smart enough. What do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, I think the longer that we're using some of these tools, the more ingrained they get into our process, and the less we're having to do to fine tune them. So I definitely see that. I mean, in the last Thursday call, there was only one interaction that we needed to make a change with, and the answer was probably about 70%. It just wasn't 100. Um, and yeah, I definitely think that that's a component of it. When you're licensing a tool like this, though, it makes it it makes it more impactful of a decision to do your research on the front end and make sure that you're getting in bed with a solution provider that's going to stand the test of time. Because a lot of our retraining has been done in WonderChat, would it would be a lot of work for us to move off of WonderChat. We're quite sticky to them right now. So that's something that we have to keep in mind as we procure new solutions or, vet different companies. That's always a risk. And I definitely think, I mean, the way that we're working, the type of work that we're doing is completely shifting. Our job is to expedite our customers' workday, and the types of stuff that we're doing now and the types of problems that we're solving for them, a human wouldn't even be able to do. It's quite interesting. Like we have some new tools on the horizon it's actually in production. It just released about a week ago, where you can import in a tool or a behavioral report, a personality report from Disk into our system, and we can use AI to predict exactly who that person is and our insights. So if a company wants to import in all of their legacy reports that they've gathered through, 10 years worth of data, they all answered a different question set on a different competitor website, we can use AI to do that. That's something that a human would never be able to do. So we're looking at that, but on a grand scale of, okay, how do we do this? But for every solution provider of the 2000. So that's kind of what we're focusing on, is doing these, world domination AI tools for the personality insights industry. And that's where we're going for it. So hopefully it works out for us.
What do you think things could look like with all this change for your business in, just 2 years?
Yeah, I think that we are going to have more and more advanced systems and models. So we're just going to need better trained staff to give really good inputs. So whether that's prompt engineering training, that's something that we're looking at. I think that's going to be a key aspect of this. Making sure that everybody in our team is keeping up to pace with all these shifts in technology. That's easier from a personality perspective for some people over others. Someone like me, I love new technology and new processes. So that just becomes natural. But for other people that are opposite to me, where they're more experience based, if they don't have that experience in their life, it's really hard for them to make the shift. So meeting everybody where they're at, making sure that they have the proper training in order to, move the needle in that way. I think it's something that we all need to be prepared for and ready for, because AI is here, and if you don't embrace it, then you're just going to be falling behind, honestly. So that's how I view that. I think it's more of a training aspect. I think we're going into a really interesting phase too, where, small companies and being nimble and being able to adapt, may be the winners, in the long term. It's really interesting because these larger companies that have much higher risk, a lot more people to train, clunky systems, clunky legacy systems where they're not able to cut bait on, some business processes that maybe aren't highly profitable, but they have a lot of staff to maintain them. I think that that's really an at-risk thing that a lot of companies need to look at. And I think we truly are. I think it may be only 12 months away from having the very first $1 billion a year revenue company with only one human, and everything else could just be AI. I think that that's also on the forefront. So a lot of interesting stuff that we're dealing with in this time. It really is. I've heard that the Google CEO said that this is AI is as transformational as the light bulb. And I do really believe that. I think that this is, we're onto something here that's really incredible.
It sounds to me like you and I have sort of similar ideas about where we're going and what is likely to happen. So don't let me put words in your mouth, but some of what you said, I think, aligns with this idea that I have that, there are plenty of businesses where it doesn't matter whether it's 10 people or it's 10,000 people. There could be a mandate from the top that we are going to use AI. Let's just make it a broad statement. But within your business or the next business, there would be more specific direction. We are going to use AI in our accounting team. We're going to use AI in our marketing team. We're going to use it in these ways and these tools and so on. You can make whatever statement you want. If you have 100 people, though, you're only going to have so many people that both are willing to try to integrate whatever tool that is likely not ideal right now for their existing process and their ways of thinking. So out of 100 people, let's say that at most that's 20. It's probably less. You have 20 people who are willing to try. And you, as a business owner, let's say, or manager, have to be willing to put up with the fact that there's going to be a learning curve. And as I think was sort of hinted at with one of the questions that I asked, and then kind of how you answered, you acknowledged that when you're trying something new, if you really don't pay attention to what the outputs are, you could get really bad outputs, worse than if a human was to just do the thing manually. So you have to have someone who's willing to try and stick at it. When you ask ChatGPT to give you something and it turns out that it's garbage, they don't just walk away and go, AI is really stupid. And you as a manager have to be willing to put up with the fact that there will be potentially some low quality output, or things are going to take longer for a while as people figure it out. Well, if it's that 20 people, you got to give them time to figure things out. What about the 80 remaining people? And, how far do they fall behind when after 6 months of this, you have 10 of those 20 people who are either producing great work and or they're producing decent work, but the ROI is just so much higher because most people's work is frankly just okay. Most people's work is not exceptional. And I don't mean that as a criticism, like people are dumb or lazy or whatever. It's just most of us aren't fortunate enough to love our work and to work in an environment or have the personalities or whatever to produce at 100%, 8 hours a day, you know? And so 6 months from now, I have 10 people who either do better or they produce well enough at about the same cost as it would, you know, 10 people plus the cost of AI. Well, in 6 months or 12 months or 24 months, you've left behind 80 or 90 of your people. Well, even if you just fire those people today, you can't pivot your business immediately. You still have clients, or you still have a product to produce. And so it sure seems to me exactly like you said. It's either a startup, it's a one person business that their process is built around AI and built around the personalities and the people who are willing to figure things out. Or you have a business that it's small enough. It's not getting started today, but it's just small enough that the cost of pivoting is frankly pretty low. That 10,000 person company, I think for most businesses, unless they're in a highly regulated market, perhaps finance or healthcare or things of that nature, those aside, their best chance is to acquire this $1 billion one person business, because otherwise you just have too much riding on the way that business is already done.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what you're saying. I think I'm in a really interesting position because I work at a personality insights company, so I'm constantly seeing data on how humans behave and get to see them in the wild too. And I'm also focusing in AI, so I'm keenly aware that the change management process of applying AI and the friction that humans can add into the way whenever you try to change their process can be frustrating for people. And I agree that there's not everybody's suited for this. And the companies that will make out, it's either you can be small enough to make some quick changes right now, affordably, or even if you're a huge company, there are some massive companies that are looking at this different. Like, we need to create an innovation hub where we, move our top performers from all over the country to that innovation hub, get them out of this clunky workplace where they have 1,000 other coworkers that are just friction in the process. Get them out of there. Let's train them the new method and the new way and some, techie new hub that we've developed. I think that is probably the only way that some of these massive Fortune 500 companies are going to be able to get out of this, is that they've got to make some really dramatic changes. But it's going to be really painful for people in the process. So that change management piece is going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree with you. The sad thing, at least for me, about what's going on at the moment is the pain. And yet I think there's a lot of opportunity. I don't think I have much of a prescription for many people, except to say that I feel like we are really right on the precipice of going back to a time that was pre-scientific management and maybe even a lot more like pre-industrialization, where there weren't many businesses that had more than, 20 or 30 employees, because before sort of the rise, quote unquote, of management, you never had people who managed other people and didn't own the company. And so you had a ton of people that, they ran their own corner store, or they did whatever it was, bookkeeping or copywriting or whatever. And it was a one person shop, or there were just a bunch of 5-person shops. And I really feel like we are right on the edge of that. And it's hard to change from thinking I go to college and I'm going to have a job to, oh, wait, 200 years ago, I really don't know because I can't transport myself back to that time. But I believe that on average, people probably didn't think much about just having a job. They probably just thought, what am I doing to make money to pay for food? And what am I doing to survive? And I think because of AI, people are going to have to start to think, what can I do that is the most valuable, regardless of whether it's quote unquote having a job or not?
Yeah, I completely agree. And with all this free time that everybody has, like what are we going to do with that? Is that hopefully it becomes more about, the family and experiences, and it comes from more of a loving place than a violent place. And as far as I completely agree with you, as far as, people need to start looking at what they're going to do for a job. They've been shoving the idea of trade school and not going to college down our throats, but we've not been changing as a society at all. They were saying that even whenever I was in college. But I just know as a homeowner, it is damn near impossible to get an electrician. Our refrigerator is broken right now. And in the city of Atlanta, where there are 7 million people, there is only one certified Whirlpool and KitchenAid refrigerator repair guy. So he makes a lot of money. So if anybody needs an idea for a future job, installing can lights and fixing refrigerators are probably pretty two high paying jobs to start with. I think that, jobs in the home, nannies, there's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to want their kids just exposed to all this stuff. So having more human touch is going to be important for us all.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I have in recent years worked quite a lot with residential services and commercial services. So people that do plumbing or roofing or cleaning or whatever else. And what I've seen in that space is that there are quite a lot of companies that are buying the small mom and pop shop, sort of like plumbers or even the parts suppliers, the local parts store. And I have no doubt that whatever the buyers of these companies predict the future is, from my vantage point, I have no doubt that what is going to happen is that there will be such a great need for physical services, real world services, as compared to, your knowledge work, so to speak, just because, as you well know, and I think plenty of people have been hearing, it's getting easier and easier to replace certain kinds of knowledge workers.
Yep.
So I think that, between the conversation with Hugh and some of the things that we've talked about here, we've been fairly clear about some of the types of things that your business does. But I would like to hear from you, what kind of situations would people be in, or what kind of people might they even be that you would say you should come and check out DNA behavior?
Yeah. So we do two parts of our business. One is that if you're just an individual learning about yourself, you're not really our target market. I'm going to be honest, but you can access all of our tools for free. So that's one way. If you're just interested about your own personality style, maybe a career that's suited for you, if you want to know if you're adaptable to technology or not from a psychometric perspective, and you want a questionnaire to tell you that from a valid perspective, you can come to our website and try a free discovery. We are primarily focused on businesses that have about 1,200 plus users that they're wanting to profile a year. So if you have that type of size and quantity of individuals that you're wanting to know these types of insights on, the subscription processes that we have would be a really good way to start. We tried to change all of our subscription packages so that it's everything that you need to get started, from a training or workflow or integration perspective, everything's included. So whenever you're looking at the subscription options available, they're small, medium, or large, so to speak, and everything is included. So that'd be two different ways to get started. And if you listen to Hugh's show or mine and you're interested in any of this, we have a podcast website page for any of the listeners. It's dnabehavior.com/start. And that's just kind of an open way that anybody that is interested in any of the topics that we talk about or interested in some of the research or even, doing one of those free personal trials, you can do that there to get started.
I often will ask people if they have any parting words of wisdom or last things to share, and you might very well have plenty, but given some of your focus, I feel like I'd love to tailor it a bit to people who are using AI or how you might think about AI or whatever. So do you have any parting words of wisdom around the use of AI for people in your situation using lots of data, building chatbots, doing analyses, or who knows what?
Yeah, so it's interesting you asked. I just did a series on Forbes.com. So it's called AI Transformation on a Budget. And it was for small and medium-sized business owners that are just looking on integrating AI and kind of figuring out what they do with it. So to save everybody the several hours of going through that program, I'll give you the 3 insights. And it's kind of a 3 baby step method of getting started with AI. So whether you're on step 1, 2, or 3, you can kind of figure out what the next step is. So the outcomes that we had were, if you have zero experience with AI and you're just interested in it, or at least just want to kind of upskill yourself, just check out ChatGPT. That's the most common one. And once you feel like you have expanded the use to that capability, where you're looking for something that's a little bit more personalized and a little bit more for you, so that you're not having to use so many prompts constantly. Like if you want it to know your output, or your writing tone, or if you're using it for emails and you always use the same parting words like best regards or best, or if you write it in a conversational standpoint, you can create a custom GPT, is what they call it. And you have to have the paid version of Chat GPT for that. But that would be kind of the second step. If you have a custom one, then you can go even one step later. So that would be kind of step 2A, and you could convert that into the API model and create your own AI agent that could talk to different workflows and systems. So that would be the step 1 and step 2. And then if you're really wanting to build almost like an end-to-end software product, but do it on a low or no code basis, you could use N8N. So that's the letter N and then the number 8 and then the letter N. And that's a solution for workplace or workflow automation. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with that. You can export out your code. You can turn it into like a working software application. There's a lot of easy and cheap ways to get started with that. And then with those 3 steps, you're really to what we're calling now an agentic AI solution. So it's an AI bot that you can think on its own, think on its feet, adapt to different scenarios that could come at it. So with those 3 easy steps, let's say a month into learning AI, you could probably get something pretty cool and maybe even start one of your own businesses and create the first $1 billion revenue, one human business. So excited what everybody builds from that.
I love it. And I will link to the articles as well in the show notes. So Ryan, I appreciate you being here. It's been great talking to you, especially having the, nuance that talking to Hugh adds to this conversation. So thank you for chatting with me. And I hope, that you all will have, I think I recall that Hugh's goal was to reach 1 billion people a year with behavioral insights or something of that nature. So I hope that you are well on the way with the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us. And we should do the show in a few years and check in on where we're at and all these changes we talked about. So I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
I would love to do that. Thank you very much, Ryan. Hey, thank you for listening. I hope you got a lot out of today's conversation. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. And please share it with someone you know who'd appreciate this kind of information. If you want to bring this kind of thinking to your own business, check out mine at inboundandagile.com. We specialize in helping leaders with challenges around marketing, communications, and leadership so they can inspire real action in their people and audiences. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll come back for future episodes.